night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
Good evening, good morning, and welcome. It's Beyond Reality Radio. I'm your host, JV Johnson. Jason is off tonight. Thank you for being here. I'm going to warn you right out of the blocks. I have very little voice. Orion is still exhausted. We were both at a fundraiser, G-Fest, in Oneonta, New York over the weekend, which was it's a music festival, basically, in support of a music scholarship for students going on to college to pursue music. And it was a great time. There was a lot of, I was in 3 or 4 of the bands, and I overdid it. In fact, at one point, my lung was laying on the dance floor because it just came out from excessive singing. But anyway, so I'm going to try to get through this tonight as best I can with what little voice I do have left, because it's a treat. And we didn't get a chance to really promote this because we had some schedule switching going on. But we've got a very good friend of the program coming on tonight. Scotty Roberts has joined us several times. He has written about a lot of paranormal phenomena, including the Nephilim, the reptilians, and many other topics. He was the editor of TAP's Paramagazine for Ghost Hunters for a long time, worked for me and with that magazine. Plus, he has his own magazine called Intrepid. He's done events. He's a tarot card reader. The man is very, very talented. He's a phenomenally talented artist. So we've got a really terrific show set up. I'm not sure what you're referring to. We've got a great show set up with Scotty tonight, and I'm anxious because we're going to be talking about visitations. Visitations come in many, many forms, and Scotty's had a personal experience recently that he wants to share with us, and I'm excited to hear about this. I know a little bit about it, but the details are still yet to come, and he's going to share all of that with us when we bring him on the program. Looking ahead, we've got a week of terrific guests, as we always do. There are still some things in progress. I'll warn you of that. But tomorrow night, Raymond Shemansky will be with us to talk about his quest for the truth about extraterrestrial visitations, talking about visitations from the perspective of a former senior scientist for the government. That's what Raymond was, and he's going to share some of his secrets with us. Wednesday night, Lee Austin will be one of 2 guests on the program. He's going to be talking about a new perspective on flat Earth theory. And we thought it was appropriate to bring Lee. Sorry about the lung on the dance floor. I just know that at one point I was screeching my lungs out to try to sing over the noise and the crowd. It was so many people. It was so loud that I felt like I coughed up a lung. So sorry if that offended anybody or gave you a vision that is less than pleasant. I know I probably shouldn't have used that. Anyway, Lee Austin will be with us to talk about a new perspective on flat Earth theory, and it's particularly appropriate because we've had Patricia Steer and Mark Sargent on the program not long ago to talk about their version of flat Earth theory and why they believe it to be true. And we've had some others talking about it. So it's kind of appropriate to take a look at this. And we've got him on for part of the program on Wednesday night. That's Lee Austin. He's been on the program before. And then Thursday, we have 2 guests as well, the first of which will be Lee Harris. Lee Harris is an energy healer. He's going to be giving practical guidance, inspiration, and a clear blueprint for growth and change, including how to invoke the help of our spirit guides and angels. So that sounds like a great program as well. And then we'll have another guest that we're lining up too. So we'll have 2 guests both Wednesday night and Thursday night. A lot of great information coming both of those nights. So as soon as we get those slots all filled, we'll be sure to let you know. Just a couple more things before we go to break and get ready to bring our guest in. Stop by the Facebook page at Beyond Reality Radio. Also stop by my personal Facebook page. It's just JV Johnson. And if you have not found the YouTube channel, it's a great place to go to look at archives and other programming elements, other paranormal stuff in particular, and it's JV Johnson on YouTube. Love to have you subscribe to that for me. So I think that's going to do it for the housekeeping. We're going to take a bit of a break here, and when we come back, we will bring in our guest. Scotty Roberts is with us tonight on Beyond Reality Radio.
Scaricon New England, the fan convention for all things pop culture, horror, and paranormal, is almost here. June 7th through the 9th at the Sheridan Hotel and Conference Center, Framingham, Massachusetts. Scaricon brings an amazing group of celebrities, including Cassandra Peterson. You know her as Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Elvira.
Heather Langenkamp, Amanda Wiss, and Lisa Wilcox from the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Plus, a 40th anniversary cast reunion and screening of the cult classic Phantasm. And many more. Scaricon also features panel discussions, film screenings, great vendors, and parties. It's a weekend of fun from start to finish. For more information, visit Scaricon.com or check us out on Facebook. Use the promo code BRR at checkout to save 25% on your admission. That's Scaricon.com. Scaricon.com. Scaricon New England is being held June 7th through the 9th in Framingham, Massachusetts.
Visit the website today. Use promo code BRR with your ticket purchase to save 25% on admission.
The phone number is 844-687-7669. Again, we'll open up those phone lines later in the show. But one of the pleasures of doing a program like this, of hosting a show like this, is that you get to meet people and you get to make friends and build relationships with people within and without the industry, in and outside of the industry. But our guest tonight, is somebody I have known well before I started doing this radio program. And in fact, I was trying to remember, Scotty Roberts, when it was exactly that you and I met for the first time. It seems like ages ago.
You know, Jim, I think the first time we met was by phone via Jason and Grant with work on the magazine. And that had to be back in... I was just recounting this myself to someone not long ago, like 2009, I think. So 10 years.
Yeah.
And then we met face-to-face, I think, at Mount Washington Hotel.
Actually, I remember it a little. Actually, I think you're right. I think it was the Mount Washington Hotel. I think you're absolutely right. I was going to say it was the Stanley Hotel, but no, I think you're right. It was the Mount Washington at one of the paranormal events there. Yes, and it was at the Stanley, too, and many other places. Yeah, well, once we met for the first time, our paths crossed very regularly. We had a lot of good times, a lot of great fun, and did a lot of very, very serious paranormal investigating too. We did. So let's get caught up. You haven't been on the program for a while, but you always have your hand in things. You've always got your pen on something and your graphic tools on something. What have you been up to? Oh, man, a lot of stuff. I don't remember the last time I was on this particular program with you, but, God, I want to say it was a couple of years ago. But a lot of stuff has happened in the last couple of years. I've been very busy all the way up to that point. As you know, I had heart surgery. I had all kinds of stuff go on. And I had the last couple of years kind of quiet for me. You know, it's that decrescendo, that fast decrescendo, and then starting to build up that slow steam into doing some things again. And so mostly I've been kind of sequestered, doing my own thing, writing, artwork, doing radio, and then now it just seems to have burst open again in the last 6 months, doing all kinds of things again. I'm working on a couple of books right now. One's a fictional book, one's a non-fictional book. We talked about my book, I think, once, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. So of a follow-up to that. New Page Books, who was my publisher, was bought out by Red Wheel Weiser, and but they're still retaining the imprint. And so they contacted me not long ago and out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you want to write a book on the Book of Enoch?" I said, "I would love to." So entering into that again and doing a lot of radio these days. I tend to do political radio with a good friend of mine, Rocky Stucci, and we do politics, we do paranormal, we do all kinds of stuff like that. And then, of course, doing investigations of our own and things like that. So it just keeps rolling. And when you say you're doing radio, you're actually hosting programs. Yes, hosting programs. Rocky Stucci and I do the Situation Room, which is, we do fairly conservative political talk radio. We like to call it common sense radio. We have a tagline, never smarter than common sense. And so we do that kind of talk, but we infuse a lot of other things into it, doing paranormal radio,
all kinds of rabbit hole stuff. And then I'm doing, I've got a YouTube channel that I've been keeping up with my travels and other things I do. And I've been reading some of my past books. It was actually my wife suggested, you know what you ought to do, Scotty? You should go on and start reading your books online. And so I started doing live streams on my YouTube, which isn't radio, it's live streaming.
Sure.
And so chapter by chapter and doing live commentary, and that's been a lot of fun.
Do you
It keeps me busy.
Yeah, of course. Well, you've always been busy. And speaking of busy, I think you kind of are the father of a small nation there. How are all the kids?
Oh, my God. I was just going to say, not to mention my small tribe.
Yeah.
Or as my good friend John Ward put it when the last child was coming, he says, well, Scotty, he says, are you starting a dynasty over there? And so I've got 6 of them. 3 are older, of course, from an older marriage and former marriage, I should say. And 3 are with my wife of 12 years now. And the youngest is 4, and the oldest is 9. And my oldest daughter's getting married in 2 weeks, so we're going out there. So, the tribe keeps me very busy. People say, oh, it must keep you young. And I said, well, quite the contrary. It makes me feel like I'd like to retire now any day. So anyway, thanks for asking. Family is good.
Yeah, well, I know that you, and I wanted to give you a second, too, while I'm mentioning this, to plug the amazing work that your daughters have been doing. I know you were just visiting them. I think they're in, North Carolina? And why don't you take a second and tell folks what they're up to?
Yeah, they're outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and they started down in Asheville, but they moved down there for various reasons, brought them down there a few years ago. But about 7 years ago, they started, they were doing costuming while going to college, my twin daughters. And they were asked by the Minnesota Renaissance Festival if they could make mermaid tails, which they readily accepted, and they found a great way to do these and cast them in silicone and all that. And the word just spread from there, and they are international. They are probably, believe it or not, Jim, there is a community of people. Think of the paranormal world around the world, community around the world. There's a mermaid world around the world, and they cater to that. And they are probably the foremost designer manufacturer of mermaid tails. And their company is Fin Folk Productions, and you can find them at that same name online. And I just went down. They had me come down and paint a big mural on their studio warehouse walls that was about 120 feet by 10 feet of all under the sea, making it look like it's under the ocean. So I was down there for a better part of a month working on that. And so they're doing very well. I'm very proud. It's nice to be a dad who has daughters, and they're twins. They're 27, and they're doing phenomenally well. And you as an entrepreneur, you as a radio man, and all the things you've been involved with, you know what it means when I say you've got entrepreneurs that have made it, and they have to keep working.
Yeah.
And you always have to keep your nose at that grindstone, and find new ways and innovative ways to stay on top of the heap. But right now, they're it.
Good for them. And I know of that mermaid culture that you're talking about because we've had folks on this program that identify that way. And
really?
Yeah, and you probably have a lot more insight into this than I do, Scotty. But when I remember when the girl was on talking about this, she said that there's a group and they meet in a swimming pool. They wear their tails, their fins, whatever you call them, and they swim around and they identify as mermaids, at least for that period of time. And it's quite a camaraderie, I guess. I don't know how better to describe it.
You know what it is? There are a lot of, like my girls say, we cater to dreams. That's what they founded their business on, was people who, and it's a lot of young people, of course. There are very few people my age, very few guys my age and my build trying to slip into a mermaid tail. But this is all for the young, and it's things that they do. It's fantasy living. It's and they all get together and do stuff. They've got models, top-notch models from around the world that do this stuff. And I'm less tooting the horn now of my daughter's business than just saying this is something that exists out there. It's like going to a Star Trek convention. You can go to a mermaid convention now and all swim around in the water.
I don't know what to say because I'm not sure I would quite understand it, but I know there are a lot of people that love it. So we have to go to break here in about a minute. So I want to introduce the topic that we're going to talk about here. We're going to be talking about visitations, but not the typical conversation here about visitations.
Right. Visions and visitations. And I wanted to try this topic out with you because it's not really a well-formulated topic. I haven't written a book on this or anything like that, and I've based it mostly on some personal experiences I've had. I'm a fairly pragmatic kind of guy, Jim. If I can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, shake hands with it, talk with it, it's tough for me to believe it exists. And yet I found myself strangely thrown into the vision category where you come out and you say literally out loud, what the hell was that? And so this is based on that.
Well, it's going to be a great and fascinating topic and discussion. And again, we will take your phone calls later in the program at 844-687-7669. Our guest tonight, Scotty Roberts, author, researcher, all-around decent chap. His website is Alan, Roberts.com. You can get information about not just his work in the topics we're about to discuss, but also some of his other work. He's got several books to his credit. We've talked about them on the program, including The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim and The Secret History of the Reptilians and more. There's a lot there. Again, it's ScottAlanRoberts.com. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will begin our discussion about visions and visitations right here on Beyond Reality Radio.
Did you know that online retailers like Amazon have constant deals that can save you money on the things you buy every day? It's no joke. Save 40%, 50%, even 80% on great products, and all you have to do is know about them. Noodle Shark is the way to be alerted when something good is coming your way. Noodle Shark is the social media page that lists great deals that not only save you money, but give you the deals before anyone else has them. All you have to do is find Noodle Shark on Facebook. Search it as The Noodle Shark. That's The Noodle Shark, because you deserve to save too. Become a shark and save.
Our guest tonight, Scotty Roberts. Scotty is an author, a researcher, all-around decent chap. Scotty, I think that particular title must have a story to it. Is there an advanced degree in being an all-around decent chap, or is that just something you get from life experience?
Well, I wish there were a degree in it because I had to acquire that through many trials and errors along the way. I think more or less I put that up as a little tongue-in-cheek a long time ago to just say I strive very hard to be an approachable, good, decent man. I've got my flaws, I got my idiosyncrasies just like everybody else, but, I do all this other stuff. I might as well say, hey, I'm a decent guy too.
Let's talk about visions and visitations. Now, when you use those words, I think a lot of people immediately go to thinking about ghosts, apparitions, things like that, or maybe angels even. There are a lot of different things that can visit. There are a lot of different things you can have a vision of. What are we talking about in our conversation tonight in relationship to those two words?
I think it's... I like to use visitation in this sense of saying in the paranormal field and community, we're used to going out and for all practical purposes, conjuring. We're out there looking for ghosts or looking for spirits. And I would dare say there's a lot of people that do this that don't really have a handle on what any of that truly is. And of course, none of us really do. We don't know if we're talking to a ghost, a spirit, a interdimensional being, something else or something other. So in looking at that, some of the experiences I've had, and they're very finite. It's a very small percentage of things that have happened to me over the years that I would classify as being visitation. And that would be, in my definition of it, something that is seeking me out, something that has come to me, something that has presented information to me almost out of the blue. It's like that phone call you get from some long-lost relative you hadn't talked to in 50 years. And all of a sudden they're calling you on the phone out of nowhere, or a voice from the past. And not an exact good analogy, but this is what I mean, because there are, and I can't put a percentage on it. All I can do is say out of the 20-plus years I've been doing paranormal investigation, from my very early days, not knowing a damn thing about what I was doing, to learning a process and learning how to do things, I would say there has been just a couple, less than a handful of times where something came to me. And now I'm making no comparison to biblical patriarchs or characters, but this example came to mind. It's like we read Bible stories. If you went to Sunday school or synagogue or anything like that, and you read those stories about all these great patriarchs in the Bible that had these visitations from God or angels, and we go, wow, what an amazing life these guys must have had, until you read the passage and say, whether you believe it's true or not, you read the passage and find out their whole life, living 80 to 100 years, comprised of about 2 minutes of visitation from something, and that governed their life. So, in a sense, using that as kind of a ad hoc, maybe even a lame example, there are very few moments I've had where I feel this vision, this visit. And as I mentioned in the last segment, I'm not given to this stuff. I'm a believer. I've always been a believer in things. I'm more in that want to believe category. I find myself at this point in my life, I'm an agnostic, meaning I have a simple belief in things. I just don't know the answers to anything for real, for certain.
Right.
And so when I've had these experiences happen to me, these visitations, I found myself a bit befuddled trying to figure out who's trying to get my attention and why. And I'm not talking about, oh, we heard a thump in the house, or we heard this and that, all these things you hear that, oh, ghosts are trying to get your attention. It was deeper than that, because it was downright communicative. It was blurring the edges of reality for a few moments that seemed like a much longer period of time, and you come out of that saying, what the hell just happened to me?
Now, visitations themselves can take many, many forms. And again, I think that most people automatically think of some type of apparition or some type of physical presence. But a visitation can come in the form of a dream, right?
Yes. I've had what I would call contacts, I used to call it, or a visitation in dreams. I've had relatives who passed on, and where you're dreaming and it's a family gathering like a Thanksgiving, and the one person is missing, and all of a sudden the room is empty and the phone's ringing, and you walk up to the phone. It's behind the easy chair on the floor, no cords attached. You pick it up, and it's your dead aunt that says, hey, I think I'm dead, but I just called to tell you I love you and I'm okay. And then you wake up. Now that I would look at as a contact. And even at that, it is so highly subjective to say it's anything other than just a vivid dream that you don't really know. You never really have that ability to weigh it out and say, here's the evidence that proves it's a real thing. I have to go on my gut feelings. And I've always said, I use as kind of a moniker in life, facts don't care about my feelings. So I have to look to the facts. And I say, what do the facts tell me? I was dreaming. But I felt this. And it's like, well, the facts don't really care what I felt. They care about what is factual. And that's across the board in many other facets of life. And so when I've had what I refer to as visitations in my life, they took the form of, Jim, it was damn near what you would see in a movie as a vision. That's the only way I can describe it to give it impact. It's one moment you're there in the present, your head is there, your head is on your shoulders, you're thinking, you're doing one thing. The next moment it all changes. And then a moment later you're back where you were, wondering what you've just perceived, what has happened, and is there somebody trying to talk to me in a different way. And as I mentioned, this all hails from an experience. I had a series of small experiences that strung together in Egypt. And they also manifested here when I was back home in the States. But it actually starts chronologically a little bit earlier than when I went to Egypt back in 2013 was when this took place. I had a good friend, Philip Coppens, who many of your listeners may know from his days where he had a stint on Ancient Aliens. He was the Belgian fellow with the long curly brown hair. I got to know him pretty well. He wrote the foreword for one of my books. He was at our Paradigm Symposium back in 2012. And at that time, he told me he wasn't feeling well and he was going to get checked up on. It was October of 2012. And he went home, and we all learned, the whole world learned, that Philip Coppens had angiocarcinoma, a cancer of the heart. By December, he was dead. Ugh. And it just hit very hard to people who knew him. I got the news on December 30th, and I remember the news hit me, and all of a sudden, I just broke. I was weeping, and the weeping was like none I had experienced in a long time, and it was just tears rolling off my face, and I was asking myself, why am I being affected? Yeah, I knew him. He was a friend, but I've had relatives die that I hadn't had that kind of reaction to. And the problem was this went on for days, and I couldn't understand why it was affecting me that way. I had a good friend, Micah Hanks, radio personality, author, that was up visiting for a week, our family, and he and my wife thought there was something going wrong with me. That's how bad it was. And every time it came into my mind, it would start up again. Then I got a call from out of the blue from a guy that I trust a lot. He's a shaman. And he called me and said, Scotty, how you doing? I go, fine, I guess. And he said, I get messages sometimes through reading things, hearing things. He said, I told you this a long time ago, and sometimes I get an audible message. He said, I was sitting here less than 10 minutes ago and heard a voice in my office out loud said, call Scotty. He said, so I picked up the phone and I called. He says, what's going on? And it all broke again, and I started relaying. I said, I don't know why I'm at, and so on. And he told me, he says, I'm going to tell you something. He says, you're going to be going to Egypt in a couple of weeks. And he said, all I'm going to tell you is it's going to change your life forever. And so be open to what happens there. And I was like, okay. And things kind of subsided. Now, you fast forward a couple of weeks, I'm in Egypt, and we went, I was with John Ward, and we were researching our book, The Exodus Reality, our study of Moses, from not a religious standpoint, but a historical one. And so we're visiting a lot of sites, and we went to Saqqara, where the stepped pyramid of Dozier is. And it's 30 miles or so from Cairo or Giza and the pyramids there. And there's the ruins are all there of the temple and the city of the dead and all this. And there's this little courtyard called the Hedseb courtyard. And there's these coved temples. If you can picture it, it's like curved top temples that are tall and narrow that would line both sides of what was about the size of a indoor soccer field, open courtyard. Most of them were crumbled and a few were standing, and there were stones all over, and archaeologists had been working. And we were there, and there wasn't much there at the time, no people visiting, and we were walking around the ruins. And I went back and I sat on a stone back there, and I'm just looking at the ruins from the far end, and everything changed. All of a sudden, the light changed. I saw long shadows being cast from these little cove temples onto the courtyard, torches lit, flames going. Now, I have a vivid imagination, but it's not that vivid. And this has never happened to me before. And I could smell incense. I could feel the breeze. I could hear chanting. And suddenly the courtyard in front of me was all clear as it was pristine in the day that it was built. And marching toward me was a line of what I could only identify as priests. And they were all bald and bare-chested with the white kilts, linen kilts, and they were all carrying platters with objects on them and walking toward me, chanting. And then they, about 20 feet from me, turned to my right, toward the temples on the right, and started moving toward them in a line. It was like a procession that was going on. And then I opened my eyes, and there I was. I wasn't sleeping. I was sitting there. As a matter of fact, it was politically incorrect to say so. I was having a cigarette. And I was sitting there, and I opened my eyes, and I said, what the hell was that? And my eyes were watered up, not from emotion, but from, you know how you get those chills that'll run through your body so severely that your eyes water.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make heads or tails of that. And I thought, whoa. I said, my imagination has gone off the deep end today. And vision was the last thing in my mind. I thought I was daydreaming or something. And so I got up and I took some pictures of the courtyard. And that's going to come prominently into this story about the pictures that I sent to you. And now fast forward another week, and we are down in Luxor now, about 500 miles south on the Nile, and we're at the funerary temple of Hatshepsut, who was the female pharaoh. Consider her the Elizabeth I of her day in ancient Egypt, in the 18th dynasty. She's a female pharaoh ruling in the place of a man. And she had a young vizier, not much younger than her, but a man that she raised up, who Egyptian history said he was a commoner. We talked about this on your show once before. This is the man I identify as the historical Moses. He was the Grand Vizier. She gave him 92 royal titles, the High Priest of Amun, the hereditary Crown Prince of Egypt. And around age 40, he disappears off Egyptian history. And the rest is the subject of another topic. But I'm at his grave, or his tomb, which is at her funerary temple. And it was off the side in the cliff faces. And I'm down there. I'm with my friend John Ward and his wife, and they're archaeologists there in Egypt. And we were going to go get coffee. And I said, okay, just give me a minute. I'm going to take another picture of this tomb, and we'll take off. And they went up onto the main road, up the rough-hewn stairway in the rock face there, and up onto the main ground. And I took some pictures, and I stood there for a second, and I said out loud, I said, and again, nonchalantly, I think I was lighting a cigarette, and hopefully that doesn't become a prominent theme in my story here. But, and I said, so, Senenmut, I said, are you Moses? And I said, Moses, are you Senenmut? Did you even exist the way we thought you did? And as I'm lighting the cigarette, it's like something, I can't even describe what it was. It's broad daylight. I'm out in the burning sun of the Egyptians, on the Egyptian sand, and this force hits me. And I drop my cigarette into the sand, and I immediately start weeping. Mm. And I remember saying out loud, what the F, I said, is that? I said, what am I crying about? I made no emotional connection to anything. I'm flailing my arms and can't figure out what's going on. I'm pacing. And then, of course, I wrote about it in my journal there. I scooped my pockets full of sand from the entrance to Senenmut's tomb and brought those home and put them in little containers. So this is the story, and this is the thing. Now, about a month later, I'm talking to Philip Coppen's widow. And I said, I hadn't spoken to you since Philip died. I wanted to let you know how it affected me. And I told her about the crying and how it affected me for days. And I said, I don't really understand that. And I said, the same thing happened to me in Egypt. And that's when it occurred to me, this is just like what happened in Egypt. And she said, oh, remember, Philip and I were going to meet you and John in Luxor at the same time because we were writing a book. She said, do you remember we were writing a book about the relationship between Senenmut, my guy for Moses, whose tomb I was at, and Hatshepsut. So after these two, the vision and the stuff at the temple, I'm back home. I'm talking to Philip's wife, Philip Coppen's wife, and I'm relaying how I had felt about her husband having passed away and how sorry I felt and the emotions that I had gone through with it. And it hit me at that time that it was the very same thing that was going on when I was in Egypt. that weeping, that uncontrollable. And I said, that is really extraordinary. And she reminded me at that point, she said, remember, Philip and I were going to meet you in Luxor because we were working on a book about Hatshepsut and Senenmut and their relationship in the 18th dynasty. And then, of course, Philip passed away. And she said, when did you say this happened? And I told her, I said, I've got my journal right here. And I picked up my handwritten journal, and I said, this happened February 4th of 2013 at about 12:30 in the afternoon. And she gasped, and she said, you aren't going to believe this. She said, after Philip's death, we had a trip that was already scheduled in Scotland. His brother came and filled in for him, a tour, and we're sitting in the hotel room drinking coffee. She said, and Philip materialized right in front of us physically and moved something and then disappeared. And she said that was February 4th of 2013, around the same time. And then she said, did Philip ever tell you that he believed he was a reincarnation of Senenmut? And I said, no, I never heard that.
Wow.
And I said, that's extraordinary. And she talked about reincarnation as being, jury's still out for me on it, but she said, he considered himself a reincarnation, not the reincarnation, and overlapping. And so what I started to see was a pattern of, with this experience, the weeping, the crying when he died, and then the shaman telling me I'm going to have a unique experience that's going to change my life in Egypt, and then the experience at Senenmut's tomb, and then finding out later that his wife had an experience of visitation from him. At the same time, I was having this happen to me with the same physical, emotional fallout as I did the day I learned he died. And then pieces started to fit together. And it's still, I still hadn't put everything together, but all of a sudden things were making sense. Now, these photographs I sent you, there is something in those photographs that could be very easily explained, but it could also be something very different. And when I look at things and attribute spirituality or paranormal, if you will, or metaphysical components to them, they have to take on for me not just something that can be debunked, because you can debunk a lot of things that are real by just using, it could have been this, but a lot of things have to fall into place. And first of all, that picture was taken right after I had the vision experience at Saqqara, and that's that Hebsed court at Saqqara. And I was looking back at the stone where I had been sitting and had that vision. As we were exiting that area,
Scotty, before we, I just want to mention something here about these pictures. I'm trying to get our assistant producer Orion to get them up on the Beyond Reality Radio Facebook page. Do you have them somewhere where they're accessible easily right now?
I do. Not online. I would have to certainly. They're on my Facebook page. If people wanted to go to my Facebook page, they'd have to scroll back a little bit to find them. But
okay, well, we're going to try to put them up on the Beyond Reality Radio Facebook page right now, so that as people are listening to this description, they can see what these photos are. We do have them on our YouTube stream, if those watching the YouTube stream have seen them, but I'd like to have them on the Facebook page as well. So anyway, continue. So they're extraordinary photographs.
Thanks. And you know what? I did not notice them back in 2013. It was only about a month ago that I was going through those pictures because a friend was going there, and I told her this story. And I said, let me show you a picture that's got the place where I was when this happened. And I blew the picture way up on my computer screen to find the place. I was going to put a little arrow and said, Scotty sat here. And as I'm scrolling in the background, suddenly I see this image with this shoulder, an arm, and part of a torso and a hip emerging from behind a stone, or a stone wall. And I thought, what is that? And it had this quality about it of looking like the pictures you see of Bigfoot or ghosts or something. There's always something partial there. You never see the full thing. And I'm getting chills just talking about it. And again, I'm not given to the weirder side of this stuff, but as I'm looking at this image, I'm thinking, first of all, John and I were the only ones there. There was nobody else there. The only other people that we met there were Egyptians, and they were the Egyptian guardians of the site, and they're all dressed in galabeas. You've seen them. They're the long robe that goes down to the ground with the long, loose sleeves, and all the men wear this, the traditional robe. And this is a picture of somebody that was either naked or something that was very tightly bound to the skin. It was very dark and uncharacteristically dark. And so as I'm looking at this, and then I'm trying to figure out where this figure was standing, so I did I sent you pictures of, I did a little mock-up showing where I was standing, a diagram of the Hebsed court, show where things were. I was trying to triangulate where this thing was standing. And it was just about 20 feet from the stone from where I was. Now, the thing about this was that it started to look like it immediately, and I mean, Jim, when you're talking about visitations and things trying to contact you, as I felt I already had been done with either Philip Coppens, the Senenmut character, all these things, the vision were coming in. Now I've got this picture all of a sudden in a period of time where lately I've been talking about this and I've been bringing it up. And so this picture comes in, and it rushes in on me that this is extraordinary. This is not a simple photograph that is a miss shot of somebody that I didn't notice was there. Nobody dresses in topless or sleeveless shirts in the sun in Egypt. And so as I'm looking through those pictures now, there are other elements of this story that need to be told. 1 year after I had that vision and that experience at Senenmut's tomb, the two different things, we were back in Egypt, and we took a bunch of people, my daughters included, came along with me, and we retracing the steps of our research expedition that we took for writing that book. And we were there. I was with a fellow named Chris Conway. Now, some people may recognize him. He was the Scottish psychic for a couple of seasons on the Brit show Most Haunted. It was after Derek Acora had left the show or had been forced off the show, and then my friend Chris Conway was there. He came with us, and he's sitting in this courtyard with me, sitting on a stone, and he says, Scotty, he says, there's an ancient man here wants to speak to you. And now he's a medium, and he's one of those people. I got to tell you, to be honest, no offense to anybody, I've been approached so many times by people that say, I'm psychic.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, right, pull this leg and it plays Jingle Bells. And but Chris is somebody I know very well. And like I've always said, even for Jason and Grant and everybody that I know in these fields, it's the credibility of the individual usually trumps any skepticism I have of that individual. So Chris, to me, was very credible. And he's sitting with me, and he says, I've got an ancient man. He says, he's 3,500 years ago. And he said, he's saying to me, he says, he's naked. And I said, I kind of chuckled. I said, oh, great. I said, Chris Conway, you're here with me, and you connect with a 3,500-year-old naked Egyptian man for me. And he said, and we laughed. He said, well, he's got a loincloth on, and something like that. And so we're talking, and he says he doesn't want to give you his name yet until he says he can trust you. And he says that he is drawn to you because you think the way he thinks. And that he says, I'm getting he was a physician or a noble or something of importance, not just a commoner. And he said he has said that he will always be connected to you when you are in Egypt, but that he'll never leave Egypt. And every time I've been back to Egypt, I have spoken in my mind to this person. I've even over here in the States, there are other aspects of this thing that have come up. But now that was a year after this. And then I've got in this photograph what looks like a bare-chested man, but you only see his shoulder, part of his chest, just a sliver of it, and down to his hip, and then his arm hanging down. And I started piecing this together. And then, now, Jim, I don't know what you personally think about psychics, and I think I've already said here, to me, they're a dime a dozen, and there are a few diamonds in the rough that stand out and that have credibility for me.
I think that pretty well sums it up, yeah.
Yes. I was speaking to somebody that I trust very closely, and you know this person, Sarah. And
Sure.
I was speaking with her, and Sarah Soderman, and she was saying to me just today, we were talking online yesterday, and she said, oh, my God, she just stops, and she said, Scotty, somebody's trying to contact you. There is something I'm getting. She said, we have got to talk. And she talked to me, and she said, there is somebody very ancient that you are either conjuring or you're doing. I said, I've conjured nobody. And she said, no. She said, in your office, your studio, you have all these Egyptian artifacts. You've got sand from Senenmut's tomb. You've got a bust of Senenmut. You've got all these things. And she said, you're conjuring whether you believe it or not. And she said, there is somebody that is reaching out to you. And the unique thing about this, Jim, is that she's not aware of all this other stuff, but only mildly. In the, she knew I'd been to Egypt.
Sure,
She'd seen some of my photos. And she said, because you are doing that, she said, you have actively kind of relit the match, and somebody is reaching out to you again. And she said, this is a guy, and it really parsed down to this, was that from the time I was a kid, when I went to Bible school and I went to seminary and I did all, Moses was always an interesting character for me, and I studied the history. I didn't want to just know the Bible story. I wanted to know the history. Was this guy there? Did he exist? What's the history? And I studied and studied and studied and finally wrote the book with John Warren just a few years ago. And she said, it's this constant interest. It's almost like building a tulpa in the sense that you create something, but this is something real. And she looked at that picture today and she said, my God, she said, that is this person. Not Senenmut. She said, I don't know who exactly that is, but that person that you that you saw in the vision, the person Chris Conway connected with, this is the person in the photograph. And again, it was 2013 to 20. It's 6 years since I took the picture before I noticed it was even there.
That's extraordinary.
So it's a very extraordinary thing, and trying to relay all the inner stuff about this that is more than just a surface retelling of, I had this great experience, and let me tell you about it. It's deep and moving. There was, after those first two visions I had, there was that first year, John called me from Egypt about a week after I got home, and he says, Scotty, he says, and he's British, and he says, you've left something here at the house in Luxor. And I said, well, what did I leave? And he said, it's more a person than a thing. And then his wife, Maria, got on the phone. She's the head of their archaeological mission. And she said, Scotty, she says, here I'm a scholar, I'm an academic. Back home in Sweden, she said, I am a witch. And she said, somebody is here. She said there was a little girl in their house that extended their hand to John and me. And this little girl said to Maria, they're on the right path. They just haven't taken my hand yet. And was extending the hand. And John had an experience that night that launched all that, and then Maria saw all of this, and they called me. And this is not something they put forward. She'd probably cringe if she knew I was talking about it on public airwaves, because they're archaeologists. They work with the Ministry of Antiquities and stuff over there. So, but needless to say, there was a series of many different events that all honed and funneled down to this vision that somebody, not me reaching out to them, other than what Sarah told me just today, she said, you created a situation, like created the perfect storm for somebody to notice you and reach out to you. And so this visitation I had 6 years ago was a vision that was given me I'm convinced of that, Jim. No matter how you slice how pragmatic I want to be.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you've got too much verification from too many angles, and we're going to continue the conversation on the other side of the break. Take your phone calls as well. I want to go back to the idea of this visitation and this whole series of events and sequence of events that have affected you so deeply.
Okay.
What is your analysis of the emotion that was involved? When all this was happening to you 6 years ago, you said on a couple of occasions you were overcome with emotion as these experiences were unfolding. Did you ever get a chance to analyze that and give that any thought?
I did, because one thing that when I'm looking into somebody else's situation, I always like to see what their emotional state of mind is. Because our emotions, our passions, the things going on in our lives, our subconscious, are all things that drive events that happen to us, especially in this paranormal realm. So I really took myself to task on this to ask, how emotionally overwrought was I about, say, Philip Coppen's death? And I had to look at that and say, he was a friend, but, we were close, but we weren't going to, get curtains together in a cottage by the shore. And so for my emotional reaction to be what it was extreme, and it made no sense to me. At the same time, I look at the emotional response at the tomb of Senenmut, and I say, that was emotional because it's been many years of doing this, wanting to be there, wanting to see, wanting to figure out the story, and yet I was not emotional at the time it happened. Until the crying started. So I look at the emotion and I say, I think emotion is something we shouldn't discount, but at the same time, it's like I've said already, facts don't care about our feelings. So the way I feel about something doesn't always necessarily mean that is the answer. It means my emotions are, I could be up or down, I could be extreme, I could be calm. And I think that these things would have happened to me because it was something from the outside. And I looked at the way I act and the way I handle things. And I tend to be calm. I tend to be calm when I am investigating. I tend to try to not be scared by things or overwrought by things, but to approach with a common sense point of view, common sense about me. So in answer to your question, I think I'm answering it, is that emotion can play a part in, I think, all of these things. But for me, the emotion was the result, not the thing that carried me into it. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So as you look back on this, now it was a 6-year period between some of this experience and when you recognized the photograph actually contained something very, very, let's call it interesting, if nothing else.
Yes.
As you now reflect on the whole experience, what's your takeaway?
Boy, I got to tell you, there is a part of this that is still there's a missing link here that I'm not getting, because while I have, even as recently as today, I'm getting information that's given to me, but of course this is not objective information. It's subjective because it's on a psychic level. It's on a mediumship level. Just talking with a friend in passing, and it came up again, and we weren't even talking about this, and she got a flash and said, "Oh my God, call me. There's something I need to talk to you about." So there are elements of this that are still being put together, and the bottom line, or if you take it as a mathematical equation, and say all these numbers and fractions add up to this result, I'm not at that yet. I've got all these numbers that are starting to head in a certain direction, and the equation is formulating. So I don't know what the end game is to this, other than to say I am convinced now, I think on a very common sense, pragmatic level, as well as an emotive level, that something reached out to me and found me. The words that Chris Conway was given by this person was, I want to give him my name, but I won't until I can trust him. I wasn't reaching out to him. He was reaching out to me. I wasn't looking for him. I wasn't conjuring. I wasn't investigating at the time, other than historically. And so all of these elements started coming together from something on the outside, the visitation part of it. And then the visualization, the vision part of it, was something delivered, thrown in my lap that I didn't expect, because I've never pursued those things. I've never looked for them. I never knew I even had one, could have one. And then, boom, there it was on my lap. So it was all something brought to my table from outside, and it played with my emotions, certainly. But like many things in life, I say there are things that can overtake you emotionally, but if you camp there, you're in the wrong place. You need to leave it there at the feet of whatever's going on, and you move on from that. You can reflect back on it, but if you are driven by that constant emotion, you are driven by something that is not solid. It's something that it's the stuff of passion, and so you've got to morph yourself into a, for lack of a better way to say it, you got to be less Kirk and more Spock. So.
You did a great job with the photographs, blowing them up, analyzing them a bit, kind of diagramming some things so people can get an understanding of perspective and all of that. Have you had anybody else look at them?
You know what I did? The day I discovered that, I threw it up on my Facebook, and I said,
take a look, yeah.
Look at this. So I just stumbled on this. What do you think? So I put, and of course I get a lot of people that will respond to it and a lot of people that give their opinions. I tend to shy away from the opinions that sound too much like the, I don't even know how to call it. It's the simple spiritualist type of answer. And they might be spot on, but I tend to shy away from those first. I want the more rugged answer. I want to, I don't need somebody going, these are just experiences we all have, and you've had a vision, and you need to give into spirits and do this and that. Not mocking it, but in my own mind saying, that's the stuff I don't want to do. I want to wait on that until I'm convinced. I want to know something before I go that direction.
And when you say more rugged answer or perspective, are you talking about people that might have a little more skepticism in their approach?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. And I had a lot of people be skeptical of this, because what it did was it challenged me to look at it and say, here's why I think this is something. And I didn't want to throw on blinders and just say, damn it, I don't want to hear anybody's thing because I'm convinced of this. What it was, okay, I hear your skepticism, but let me tell you why I think it's a little different than what you're offering up. It's because of this and this and this and this and this and this. It's like when you get an EVP and somebody said, that was just a sound, you didn't actually get an EVP. And you say, but I put all these things together, including things like it came right on the heels of what I asked. It did this, it was that voice, it was here, it was now. And all these elements fall into place. So the skepticism fades with the credibility that's being built of the situation you're presenting. And that's really what I did. I wanted people to challenge me so I could challenge myself to look at it and then say, there's some things I can start the process of elimination.
So if you
and I still come out with this photo being what I think it is.
Yeah. Now, if you've, as you were told, kind of created this environment, kind of opened the door to this, is it specific to you, or it's just
no?
What do you think here?
I think this is something everybody can kind of put in their pipe and smoke it a little bit. I was told today that Sarah was talking to me in general terms about the way these types of things happen. And she said, Scotty, you've been conjuring this thing your whole life. And I said, well, that wasn't the first thing. She said, you conjured this. And I said, I don't do conjuring. How did I conjure this? And as I mentioned earlier, you've got the artifacts around the sand from his tomb. You've got all these things. And then she said, you've been conjuring this your entire life. And from the moment I became interested, and it sounds like a funny thing for a teenage kid to be interested. I was interested in Moses. Just because I went to Sunday school and stuff like that, I went into ministry originally, so these were things that interested me. And I built on that, and my whole life leading up to writing that book a few years ago with John Ward, that was 40 years in there of this topic. And she said, for 40 years, you've been building this up. And she said, and these characters, once you started rooting it out and digging for, I wasn't conjuring things, I was digging into history. I was looking into historical record. I was trying to find answers to the historical question I had. And she said, by doing that, she said, you have, in essence, your whole life built this up. And I think that's what anybody is doing when they have experiences like this, that they've, and Sarah and I talked about this, the psychological side of things. And I have to say here that I've said this to you before, too, is that as much as we live in a natural world, we are in a supernatural world, but I don't think the two things are necessarily different. I just think that there are some things we don't see. When we can breathe, we don't see oxygen. Yeah, we can measure it and all of that scientifically, but you don't see it. I think it's the same thing here. There are elements to life that are unnatural or supernatural because they are not things that we see and experience every day, yet they are surrounding us every day. And it proves it. So every now and then it breaks through, it pierces that veil and takes you by surprise, sometimes by the nape of the neck. And I think that's what happened to me with this thing.
Do you think there's more to come?
Yeah. I honestly believe that because I still have questions. I can't believe it's kind of like deciphering God for me. You have all these questions, and I wrote something a very long time ago. I found it in a very old journal about 25 to 30 years ago, and it said, I had written the line, God wrestles with us in the night times of our life, but at daybreak he's gone. And I meant that to be a more poetic way of saying God's always there in the dreams, in the nighttime, and the things you stir about all night long. Then you get up and you have your cup of coffee, you scratch your butt, and you go, okay, I got to go to work. And it's all gone. It's washed away. And so I think this thing has not finished with me because there is no solid answer yet. I cannot believe that I would be being given visual things, having something reaching out to me. And by the way, it reached out to me here back home. And I don't know how much time we have, but there was a little event where I called out to it and I said, you said you would never leave Egypt. It was going into a situation I was calling for protection, personal, quiet in my own mind, riding in a car. And I called out to this character, this 3,500-year-old man, and I said, I know you said you'd never leave Egypt. I said, do you hear me? I said, I seriously, Jim, was sitting there saying, I feel really silly for even doing this. It's like praying to something, and it's in my head, and this is stupid. But I said, I worked myself beyond that, and I said, if you are there and can extend protection to me, make that evident to me. And I'm sitting with my eyes closed in this car, and I felt, and Jim, I'm turning around, I'm looking at a statue right behind me, a bust of Senenmut, and it looks just like this. His chin, I felt sitting in the car, the chin on the top of my head, and arms from behind me wrapped around my shoulders, enfolding me in, which is the way you saw a lot of these statues, the statuary, connected with all of this stuff. And I felt it. Jim, I cannot explain it other than to say, here I am, I'm riding in a car, we're all laughing, we're joking, we're telling locker room jokes, we're going to go to this little investigation, the three of us, John, Rocky, and me, and I call out for protection in a moment of silence, and I get this. And I felt, as much as you can physically feel something, like somebody was sitting in the seat with me, wrapping their arms around my shoulders, with my head under their chin, and I felt instantly this person saying to me, yeah, I can do that. And so is it over? No, because I haven't delved the depths of it yet, even though I've had these experiences, which are, for me, extraordinary things I've never experienced before. With all the stuff I've seen, you've been around it too, Jim. You
Sure,
know,
yeah.
you can look at somebody and say, I've been touched, I've been scratched, I've been pushed, I've seen things, I've been yelled at, I've heard EVPs, I've had things communicate with me. But I've never had it in all those types of things, something like this happen to me. And it definitely changed who I am forever.
Yeah, how can it
without
not?
a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, how can it not? It's pretty remarkable. Scotty, that's going to bring us up to the point where I've got to say goodbye. Before I do, give us about 30 seconds of what you're up to these days and what people can be looking for here.
Well, you can go to my website, scottallenroberts.com. I'm working on a fictional book that's actually set in 1920s Egypt, suspense, horror, paranormal fiction, adventure, action, all of that. For my agent, I'm working on that. And I've got New Page Books through Red Wheel Weiser has asked me to write a book on the Book of Enoch, which I'm going to be hopefully in the very near future here, launching into that. You can go to my YouTube channel, which is just my name. It's Mr. spelled out M-I-S-T-E-R, Scotty Roberts. If you go to youtube.com.
What are you doing on YouTube these days? I know you're doing some streaming. You said you're reading your books and stuff like that. What else?
I'm reading some of my past books.
Mm-hmm.
I finished The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. I'm in the middle of Reptilians right now, The Secret History of the Reptilians, which is the pervasive presence of the serpent in human history, religion, and alien mythos. And I'm doing commentary along the way. Because some of these books have changed a couple of my views as I go along. And so I'm that's all up on my YouTube. I'm doing that every day right now.
That's awesome. Scotty, thank you so much. I know it was short notice getting you on the program, but as always, it was fascinating, and I love having you on the show.
Jim, I love being here. Thanks for asking me.
Tomorrow night, Raymond Shemansky will be here to talk about his quest for the truth about extraterrestrial visitation from the perspective of a former senior scientist for the government. And Slick is telling me the only thing we can't ask is anything about his security clearance, which is pretty ominous in itself. But that's tomorrow night's program. We've got more great programs coming up for the rest of the week, including Lee Austin talking about flat earth theory, and Lee Harris, who is an energy healer. It's a great week of programs right here on Beyond Reality Radio. I'm JV. We'll catch you tomorrow night.
Beyond Reality Radio is hosted by Jason Hawes JV Johnson and produced by Alexandria Johnson and Slick Eddie Edwards for Entercom Radio. Beyond Reality Radio is distributed by Westwood One Radio Networks. Stop by our Facebook page and say hello. Follow the hosts on Facebook as well. For Jason Hawes, follow at jasonhawes.taps. For JV Johnson, follow at JVJ Paranormal. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Radio or you have a suggestion for a guest, contact Slick Eddie Edwards at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com. Be sure to visit our chat room as well at beyondrealityradio.com. Thanks for listening.